And now we can start the webinar with Maria Lucia Uribe, who is our moderator for today. She is the Executive Director of Arigato Geneva, and she leads the Strategic Direction of Ethics Education for Children initiative. Arigato's international engagement with child rights initiatives with UN agencies and mechanisms, and child rights-based NGOs in Geneva. Maria Lucia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Vedica. It is a pleasure for me today to moderate this panel on the topic of the child rights and the spiritual development of children. This is the second of a series of webinars that we have been organizing together with the Consortium on Nurturing Values and Spirituality in Early Childhood, which is a consortium of several organizations that are working on early childhood, education, the protection of children from violence, that have been working together since 2018 to understand the linkages between the spiritual development of children with the protection of violence and the flourishing of children. We will have more information about this consortium on the chat, but this webinar is organized by the consortium, and we are very pleased to have today a very distinguished speakers to help us understand better the linkage between child rights and spiritual development. This area is understood by us as a critical aspect of the holistic development of children. In the consortium that we lead, we have been discussing Article 27 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child that speaks on the right of the child to have a standard of living that allows them to develop mentally, physically, socially, emotionally, but also spiritually. And the spiritual aspect of the child has normally been an aspect that is under-researched, perhaps misunderstood, and under-invested. During the last 4 or 5 years of the consortium, we have been trying to understand better what this means, how it is understood also in the context of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, but also what are the limitations and the challenges that we have and the opportunities. So the speakers today will have the opportunity to reflect with us on this particular topic. What is the importance and how we can work better and to promote this spiritual aspect of the child. We will have interpretation today, so for those who do not know, you can click on the bottom the world icon that says interpretation, and then you can have the interpretation into Spanish. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our speakers. We have 4 speakers today. Dr. Rinchen Chopel, who is the Director General of SAYEVAG and Vice Chair of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. He is a Bhutanese national currently serving as the Director General of the South Asia Initiative to End Violence Against Children, with chapters in all 8 countries of South Asia. He's also the Vice Chair, Rapporteur, and the focal point for Asia and Pacific of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. He also holds the chair of the committee, the CRC Committee's Working Group on Children in Emergencies, and a member of the Working Group on Committee's General Comment 26 of Children's Rights and Environment, with a special focus on climate change. Rinchen, it's a pleasure to have you. If you can turn on your camera so that we can also have you with us. And then we have Dr. Rima Salah, who is Assistant Clinical Professor of Child Study at the Child Study Center at the Yale School of Medicine. And she's also the chair of the Early Childhood Peace Consortium, which is also a member of the Consortium Nurturing Values and Spirituality in Early Childhood. Dr. Rima has had a distinguished career in international organizations with notable roles at the United Nations and UNICEF. She served as a member of the United Nations High-Level Independent Panel on Peace Operations from 2014 to 2015, and as a Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General for the UN Mission in the Central African Republic and Chad. I can say much more things about you, Rima. You have a long CV, but I also want to say that Dr. Salah has received numerous awards, including the French Legion of Honor and the 2021 Peacemaker Award from the Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution at Brigham Young University. She also chairs the Early Childhood Peace Consortium that was established in 2015, which unites leaders from various sectors to promote peace through early childhood development. So I'm going to leave it there. Rima, thank you for joining us. Our third speaker is Mrs. María Julia Garcete Yegros. Bienvenida, María Julia. María Julia is the director of the Inter-American Institute for Children's Rights. She is a social worker from the National University of Asunción. Her professional emphasis is in the field of the rights of children and adolescents, the formulation of public policies, and since 2010, her specialization in early childhood. There is also a lot to say about you, María Julia, but just maybe to say that María Julia was part of initiatives to draft laws, promotion and protection of motherhood and breastfeeding, advertising with educational content, creation of the national program to support timely stimulation, and many others, particularly related to the girl child. And since July 2023, very recently, she has served as Director General of the Inter-American Institute for Children and Adolescents of the Organization of American States. And she's based in Montevideo in Uruguay. Thank you for joining us, María Julia. And last but not least, we have Dr. Hans Morten Hogan, who is professor at the Faculty of Theology and Social Sciences at the VID Specialized University in Oslo, Norway. Dr. Hans has written extensively on human rights and inclusive development, and some of his publications include It is Time for a General Comment on Children's Spiritual Development, which is very appropriate for this webinar, Hans, and I hope that we can share the article with all the participants today. And also, among other articles, Faith Among Youth in Church of Norway Means Greater Interreligious Acceptance, that was published in the Nordic Journal on Religion and Society. Thank you, Hans, for joining us today. Great, so without further ado, we will go through the different speakers. The modality today that we want to have is a dialogue. So we will be giving the space to the speakers in the beginning to respond to a question and to elaborate on this particular question. And then we will be able to have a dialogue among the different speakers. And then we will have the possibility to have questions and answers. For all the participants, thank you for joining us. You can write your questions on the chat, and we will be able to address those questions during the dialogue session. I think we'll have lost Rinchen. Rinchen, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, can you turn on your...
I just moved. No, my video is disabled from the other side, I think from your side.
Ah.
I cannot turn it on.
Okay, so if you can help Oshan to turn on the camera. But Rinchen, thank you for joining us. I think the first question for you and to get us started with this webinar is, how does the Convention on the Rights of the Child address the spiritual dimension of a child's development? And why do you think it is important to recognize this aspect in the development and the rights of children? The floor is yours, Rinchen. Rinchen, are you with us? my colleagues at the technical side. Can you confirm that Rinchen is with us?
I think, unfortunately, we lost the connection with
Ah,
Risha.
he's coming online again. Dr. Rinchen is joining us from Nepal, where he's having a mission, and I imagine maybe his connection might be unstable. Rinchen, can you hear us? No.
Yeah, now I'm back, but I had to move to a place where the lighting is not very good because of the net connection. But I did hear your question, and in the limited time, let me try and quickly give my two-bit opinion. But before we start, I'm sure all of us who have joined here are experiencing the trauma and the horrifying experiences of what is happening in this ongoing conflict targeting women and children. And I hope that all of us can pray that some definitive interventions can be taken. For now, everybody seems to be sleeping. But with this, the topic of child rights and spirituality is something that has always intrigued me, all this 30 years plus work that I've been doing for children at the national level in Bhutan, then at the regional level, and now, with my work in the UNCRC committee, I see that there is a definite vacuum in the discourse or in the provisions of the CRC convention that we continuously hold the dialogues with the state parties, which seems to be so, in a way, not seemingly providing the answers and responses that we're looking for. Something seems to be missing. And I think that's what probably is ailing our universe. That's something which is not actually helping us to create a society that is, human, that is able to nurture our other sentient beings the way we can create a world that lives for each other. And I think that's the reason we have all this never-ending conflict, tragedies, violence, destructions everywhere. And I think probably the answer needs to be in our quest for what this today's topic seems to be putting on the table, looking at a much more higher quest than what we are looking at in the words and articles of the conventions, not just the CRC, but all other human rights instruments of the UN conventions. Now, if you look at the UN CRC, I'm sure all of us would have gone through the CRC convention multiple times, again and again, letter by letter. And every time you read through this, you see that the actual essence of the drafters, whoever put the convention together, those pioneers, actually put a lot of emphasis on holistic development of a child. The social, cultural, emotional, and spiritual development of our children, that becomes the foundation or the encapsulating framework within which children should be nurtured. But in our efforts and within the 54 articles that we put on the table and hold states accountable, we are looking at all aspects except any meaningful, tangible dialogue on spiritual development of children and the accountabilities or the gaps which we don't seem to be addressing at any point of time. And I think that's why I think this is so important. And why I say this is because I've had experience in terms of addressing this during my term in Bhutan, when I had the privilege of spearheading the Bhutan's reporting and Bhutan's compliance and obligation to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And when I established the National Commission for Women and Children and headed the National Commission for Women and Children. And me and one of my colleagues who was working with UNICEF, with the wisdom of a Buddhist, very learned Buddhist scholar, who, of course, very sadly is no longer with us today, we put the CRC Convention. We are looking at how the CRC Convention will become meaningful and relevant to a country like Bhutan, a country that's very unique in terms of many ways, but very strongly rooted in Buddhist philosophies, religion, Buddhism being a way of life, and wanted to also look at how it becomes, sort of attractive to a country where the political system is still a hereditary monarchy, where rights do not necessarily become such an important factor because everything is based on welfare for the people. So we then we decided that we will put the whole convention into the mandala. And I'm sure all of you must have heard about the Buddhist mandala, which is the depiction of the universe. And in the center of that universe, of that Buddhist mandala, we put the child, and the four immediate boxes or circles around the child is about social, cultural, emotional, and spiritual development of the child. So therefore, while we deal with social, cultural, and emotional, physical, social, cultural, and physical things, spiritual has been always, sort of something we talk about, but there are no tangible things that we can hold our hands and then address it. But if you look at issues that the CRC Convention may not directly, but in many ways address in the work the convention committee does, in our general comments, in our dialogues with the state parties, particularly when you're talking about violence against children, we try and look at how the element of humanity and how human and holistic approach of rearing children seems to be missing, and we are so bogged down by numbers, figures, laws, policies, instruments, plans, and not necessarily looking at the core essence of bringing children holistically. So from that perspective, I think it's timely that we expand our discourse on spirituality, and we expand how the Child Rights Convention and the Child Rights Committee becomes meaningfully, aligned to the discourse that we are having today. And as a member of the committee, I believe I can also keep harping on this during my term in the committee, and also because, this is something which I have done a lot of work in South Asia by bringing or working together with a lot of religious leaders and bringing faith organizations, creating the SIWAC interfaith think tank, where we actually address how faith-based organizations shift from a religion discourse to a spiritual discourse and look at every child as a hope for the humanity as we move forward. And so therefore, from that perspective, I think today I am very excited to listen to this learned, very experienced speakers who are on the panel, and also from the participants who join the webinar, from their views, and see how I can enrich my experience, how I can supplement my knowledge gaps, and then try and contribute to this whole discourse. And I hope that whatever we do today in terms of inculcating a better accountability and movement on spiritual development as an important element of child rearing, which will hopefully take our universe, our world, from all this destruction, violence, conflict, and become much more human and become friendly. And one element before I end, the General Comment 26 which was launched by the CRC committee in our September session. With lot of debate and discourse and guidance from the European Link Coalition for Animal Welfare and Rights, we managed to include in the environment by expanding the definition of the environment, by including the animal world, and also under the violence segment, we also included, ensuring that children are not exposed to violence, whether it is at home or violence inflicted on animals. And I thought this is a way of ensuring that children develop or children learn to, not normalize violence and learn to become more friendly with the environment around which they live and in which they have to nurture and grow. So this is an effort that we are making, but I'm very, very thankful to the organizers for giving me this platform. And I look forward to whatever efforts we can put together to make this a more meaningful, tangible journey ahead. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you so much, Rinchen. This is very good because you highlight how the spiritual aspect is part of this holistic well-being of the child that is in all the convention, the rights of the child in different articles, in different ways, and the spiritual aspect has always been highlighted. Maybe just to say an aspect of this, the consortium has defined the spiritual development of children as a central aspect of holistic development. So exactly what you said, that enables a gradual and progressive unfolding of children's innate ability to connect with themselves, with others, with nature, and with that what they refer as God or the transcendent or the ultimate reality or the divine, and in their search for meaning, for purpose, belonging, and transcendence. That's a definition that has been given, and I'm very glad that you mentioned General Comment 26, because in the aspect of the relation with nature, and how children learn to connect themselves with nature, with what is around them, and also with the other, you mentioned also issues of violence and that affect children, but also not just inflicted on children, but also violence that when children are nurtured with care, they also can become perpetrators of violence later in life. So these are very good points that we will be building on, Rinchen, in the next round of questions and dialogue.
Sure.
So thank you so much. I would now like to invite Maria Julia Garcete for her intervention. And Maria Julia, we have heard also from Rinchen a little bit of a perspective from this aspect. And he has also mentioned from the perspective of the Bhutanese society in connection with Buddhism and in connection with religious wisdom and so on. But we also know that spiritual development of children is not necessarily connected to religion, but also to culture, and is an innate aspect of the child. So it's not strictly related to religion. So how do cultural and religious and regional differences affect the recognition of children's right to spiritual development in the Americas? And so I think if you can also expand in your presentation, Maria Julia, the aspect of how it is understood also from the context in Latin America, in the Americas, this aspect of the spiritual development of children as a right. The floor is yours. So for everyone, Maria Julia is going to speak in Spanish, so you can use the interpretation button to English so that you can hear the interpretation. The floor is yours, Maria Julia.
Muchas gracias, María Lucía. Primero que nada, quiero agradecer por la invitación a Arigato y al consorcio por esta iniciativa. A nosotros nos honra mucho realmente ser parte de este intercambio. Bien, refiriéndome a la pregunta, y me parece muy interesante cómo plantean el conversatorio a través de preguntas, pues Las preguntas nos posibilitan la reflexión y el intercambio justamente. Entonces, sobre las Américas y la influencia de la cultura y estas diferencias regionales que tenemos que partir de lo que entendemos por cultura, cómo la definimos. Entonces, partiendo de esta definición de la relación, todo lo que generamos en nuestro vínculo con nosotros mismos, con la naturaleza, con los otros y con la comunidad, si comprendemos así la cultura, cada contexto, cada región va determinando una diversidad de expresiones, tanto culturales como también espirituales. Entonces, esa es la evidencia también de lo sagrado y cómo se va transitando desde las diferentes culturas y las diferentes regiones esta experiencia, tanto adultos, tanto para los niños. Así, nosotros en las Américas, este es el símbolo de las Américas en lengua de señas, América del Norte, Centro y Sur, en lengua de señas, que es también otro tipo de cultura y de expresión, se constituye un gran mosaico multicolor, porque cada región, la andina, la sur, la del Caribe, la de Centroamérica, la del norte, por su propio contexto de naturaleza y de relaciones, hace una diferencia y un vínculo del ser con lo trascendente y con lo sagrado. Entonces, ¿cómo afecta esta situación, esta diversidad al desarrollo espiritual del niño o la niña? Creo que lo que impacta en positivo es cuando, a pesar de toda esa diversidad y esa diferencia, podemos encontrar el sentido de lo humano, el sentido de la experiencia humana, como lo decía también el que me antecedió, Rinchen, como una percepción holística, una percepción integral del ser. Entonces, el poder mirar ese desarrollo espiritual desde esa comunión con el entorno, consigo mismo y con los demás, es lo que hace posible ese desarrollo positivo de la espiritualidad en el niño y la niña. O sea, cómo unirnos en ese punto común que todas las religiones o las expresiones culturales tienen, que se trata del vínculo con lo sagrado, independientemente del formato de una religión o de una determinada cultura. Ese encuentro consigo mismo, con lo comunitario y con la naturaleza. Creo que ese es el punto de unión o el punto común donde podemos hacer tangible o hacer concreto para los niños algo que es muy difícil de expresar porque es algo intangible, tiene que ver con la energía y con algo que lo sentimos, pero tenemos que plasmarlo en hechos concretos, porque la construcción del sentido espiritual para el niño o la niña, desde la primera infancia, inclusive desde la vida intrauterina, nos plantea toda una revisión de esa espiritualidad antropológica, digamos, desde el punto de vista del humano, cómo se transmite al niño esos valores, ese sentido de la vida, ese propósito, ese sentido de trascendencia. Por ejemplo, traigo a la memoria en este momento las comunidades que son uno de los pueblos originarios que habitan el sur de América. Ellos cuando entran al bosque, piden permiso al bosque para entrar y también hacen la promesa de tomar aquello solamente necesario para el sustento de la vida. Entonces, esa es una característica que tenemos en América, esa vivencia de la naturaleza que se le da como una entidad también del ser. Inclusive en Bolivia se habla del derecho de la tierra como planeta, de la Pachamama, y ya nos va dando como esas diferencias. Ahora, también se me planteaba la pregunta, ¿verdad? Como, ¿qué esfuerzos de colaboración, ¿verdad? Tenemos que tener o formar a nivel regional para que este desarrollo espiritual de los niños y niñas pueda ser algo que aporte a su bienestar. Entonces, necesariamente la colaboración, la cooperación pasa por acuerdos, pasa por consensos, por trabajos comunes. Por eso es que el instituto se haya muy comprometido con esta iniciativa de Arigato de tomar la dimensión espiritual del desarrollo del niño. Y es ahí donde esta intersectorialidad y esta interseccionalidad de nuestras vidas hace todo el sentido para construir esto común. Entonces, en esto común, la opción por el desarrollo de los derechos de los niños y su desarrollo espiritual es lo que nos lleva a este respeto, a este conocernos mutuamente y poder establecer estos diálogos, poder establecer la escucha, la valoración, el percibir al otro y al tiempo de sentirnos en confianza, de poder expresar nuestras ideas, nuestros sentimientos y también ese vínculo con lo trascendente, con lo divino o con una energía presente en la vida. Entonces, yo quería puntualizar solamente para cerrar estas ideas porque es un tiempo, yo creo que para ver los desafíos que tenemos, por lo menos en nuestra región, uno de los continentes más violentos hacia sus niños, niñas y adolescentes. Creo que el desarrollo espiritual tiene que ver con no separar lo sagrado de lo cotidiano, que lo sagrado y lo cotidiano puedan unirse y puedan armonizarse. También una construcción continua, cotidiana, de la ética del cuidado, de que los adultos realmente podamos asumir nuestra responsabilidad de cuidado de los niños, de su protección y poder desnaturalizar la violencia en nuestras relaciones como adultos, pero sobre todo en nuestras relaciones con los niños en su educación, porque todavía el castigo físico sigue siendo naturalizado en la educación a los niños. Entonces, ese es un llamado que yo quiero hacer, el poder como adultos observarnos continuamente para poder establecer esa comunicación con los niños y como yo siempre hago este gesto de ponernos a su nivel, salir de nuestra estatura adulto y ponernos al nivel realmente de niños y niñas para que ellos puedan sentir a Dios, a la energía que nos trasciende a la vida como una energía amorosa, de unidad, y no una energía o un Dios que castiga, que le juzga, que le reprime y que le genera temor. Creo que la imagen de Dios que tenemos que transmitir a nuestra infancia, no importa qué religión sea, es la imagen del amor y no del miedo, no del castigo, no de un Dios que nos reprime. Entonces, esa idea quería dejar María Lucía y también para los colegas que comparten esta mesa. Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti, Maria Julia, for these very good ideas, and you have pointed to so many things that I'm glad you have mentioned. And I think one important aspect, first bringing also the indigenous tradition into this important aspect of spirituality, linking it with the sacred of life. And we know that in the indigenous tradition is the sacred of life in all its forms, right? As you mentioned, it's not just the relation with the other, but also the Mother Earth, and you mentioned Pachamama, and that relates to what Rinche was also talking about, this connection with nature. So the wisdom of our indigenous communities, but you also mentioned of how we make this, in a way, intangible concept something tangible. And I think you were very clear saying that it's through this relationship with others, how we connect with the child. And you mentioned even from the early years, and when the children are, the babies are, before they are born, how we nurture in the child and transmit in the child this sense of spirituality. And then I also want to mention, because that's our next panelist is going to talk about the connection with violence. But you also mentioned this, how when we see the child also with an ethics of care and understanding how we care for the life of the child, for the sacredness of the child, and the way children grow up and fulfill and thrive in their lives, we also, in a way, treat the child without violence. So when there is this understanding of the child as a spiritual being as well, there is understanding of how we nurture the child and how we care for the child with ethics and care. And I like this last part, Maria Julia, on going down to the stature of the child, because it's how we see the child for who or she or he is. So very good points that I think it's helping us to understand, and I hope for the participants, how the spiritual development of children is conceived and why it is critical, as we see it as part of the rights of the child, which we will be constructed in our dialogue. So I go to our next panelist, and this is Dr. Rima Salah. Rima, in your view, how can the recognition of the child's right to spiritual development can help address the complex interplay between spiritual development, violence prevention, social cohesion, and peace building, particularly in context of fragility, conflict, and violence? And I think Maria Julia started to speak about this connection with the issues of violence. So if you can elaborate, I know this is almost like for a big essay on this topic, but if you can give us some of your reflections on this particular aspect, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It gives me great pleasure and honor to be with you this morning or this afternoon and participate in this timely webinar, Child Rights and Spiritual Development. I would like to thank you, Maria Lucia, for the invitation. Just to tell you that I joined UNICEF in 1987 in the era when child rights were steadily gaining ground. It was the era of new ethics for the protection and care of children. It was the era that confirmed that every child has rights, whatever their ethnicity, gender, religion, language, and abilities and status. It was the era that heralded a fundamental shift in how children and childhood are perceived, and that the strength of society is inevitably linked to the flourishing of their children. The Convention on the Rights of the Child, with its 4 principles of non-discrimination, the right to survival and development, the best interest of the child, and the right to participate in all matters that affect their lives. It was further reinforced in Article 16 in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on the family, the importance of the family as the natural and fundamental group unit. Article 18 in the CRC stipulates that the parents have the primary responsibility for the upbringing and development of the child, and calls on all state parties to render appropriate assistance to parents, caregivers, and legal guardians in the performance of their child rearing. So this also put the importance of parents, which we also talk about it. So as stated also, as you know, in Article 27, the CRC acknowledges the right of every child to a standard of living that promotes their physical, mental, spiritual, moral, and social development, and which was further reinforced in other articles, as we know, 29 on education, 30 on minorities, and 32 on protection of children. So it's not optional component of the development, but lies at the core of their well-being and lays the foundation for children to thrive. It's so important. Also, spiritual development contribute to the protection of religious freedom, as in Article 14, as well as learning and respecting people who have different culture, beliefs, promoting tolerance among the people. So this is the holistic development of the child. The call of the CRC is echoed and complemented by an emerging and well-established body of scientific evidence from multidiscipline, neuroscience, epigenetics, psychology, education, economics, that continues to substantiate the links between the early years of life and early life environment with long-term well-being, violence prevention, which is very important, and behaviors linked to more peaceful communities. So based on the Lancet reviews that we had, it is clear that the formative years of life and intra and interfamily and community relationships are powerful agents of change that can promote resilience, social cohesion, and peace. Unfortunately, we are living in a critical global context marked by unprecedented threats to peace and security. Today, millions of families and children find themselves in situation of war, of displacement, and military occupation. In 2022, approximately 468 million children were living in conflict zones, according to Save the Children. Also, at the end of 2022, more than 108 million people were forcibly displaced, and an estimated 43% were children, according to UNHCR. As we speak now, a tragedy is unfolding in Palestine and in Gaza. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, also quoted by the executive director of UNICEF in her briefing to the Security Council on the 30th of October, 8,300 Palestinians were killed, including over 3,400 children. The children who survived until today, until this morning, are denied water, food, health services, and humanitarian aid in general. We are concerned about those children, but we are concerned about all children living in this situation of deprivation as they pose not only physical threats, but psychological traumas resulting in toxic stress that leads to significant harm for children's short and long-term well-being. And also the exposure of the families, parents, to instability and stress challenge their ability to provide for their children the protection and the nurturing care that they need. Is this a lost generation? In such periods of wars and conflict, therefore, it is vital to invest in solutions that will disrupt cycles of violence, build strong foundation for sustainable development and social cohesion, promoting a culture of peace. The good news is that emerging science also heralds a new era with windows of opportunities through investment in positive early development of young children as a path to creating a culture of peace and as a path to social transformation and violence prevention. That is why the Early Childhood Peace Consortium is convinced that a comprehensive early childhood development, a holistic early childhood development, including spiritual development, are now more important than ever to mitigate the immediate and long-term impact of deprivation and wars on children and their families. Supporting and empowering them today can not only interrupt cycles of deprivation, but maybe build a strong foundation for peace, for resilience, social justice, and social cohesion. On the occasion of the 34th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, let us all start erecting building blocks for a peaceful future for our children, thus changing the tide of violence which we are seeing today, with all children as the drivers for peace. Yes, the children can be, and their families, the drivers for peace. And ladies and gentlemen, the time is now. It will be too late after. The time is now. Let us do it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rima. And I appreciate, and I think people on the chat are also saying, bringing us also to the reality that children are living today with the current conflicts, but also forgotten conflicts in the world where children for many years continue to suffer and be victims of violence, context of fragility, of poverty, structural violence that affect children. And I think the connection you make, Rima, on the importance of investing in early childhood development as a pathway to peace is a critical one. And I think our previous panelists have been mentioning also this, from the family, from the conception of the children, from the how children are nurtured, the ethical care that is so much needed. And I think in here, the holistic development of the child, not just nurturing children physically, nutritionally, their education, so they learn mathematics or they develop cognitively, but also their capacity to relate to others in peaceful ways, their capacity to forgive also, their capacity to be compassionate with others. And these are very much aspects that are related to the spiritual development of children. So these connections are very much appreciated, Rima, and I hope that we can continue building in the next round in the dialogue on this. So thank you so much. I go to our next panelist, Dr. Hans Morten. And Hans, I think you have here a critical part in the discussion, is in a way helping us to shape the discussions. And so from your perspective, acknowledging the recognition to the right to spiritual development in international frameworks such as the CRC, what can we do, or how can we ensure that this right can be fulfilled for children, particularly those in the early years. So we said, and I think also Rinchen was saying in the beginning, that this is often a right that it's not reported, particularly in the reports that countries do to the Committee on the Rights of the Child. How can we ensure that this right can be fulfilled and that it's actually addressed when we talk about children's rights? So the floor is yours, Hans.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this and for your efforts. I can just say that the two articles that I was mentioned in the start are both available online, so they can be downloaded for anyone who likes to. We can maybe put them in the chat if people like to do that. I am very happy to kind of see that the Committee on the Rights of the Child is having a vice chair who is now committing at least from his part what can be done in the Committee on the Rights of the Child. I can say that these two articles are written within a project that was funded by Church of Norway, which is the majority church in Norway. It's a Lutheran church, used to be the state church of Norway, about children's Christian education. And it was written with various methods, so to say. So I will just first start by affirming the definition that was given earlier about the multidimensional and holistic aspects of spirituality. And then I will say something that even if there are 4 provisions in the Convention on the Rights of the Child that are addressing spiritual development, it is not addressed in the form of being a right to spiritual development. So there is actually quite infrequent. I can say one country that I found a report by is Lithuania. They refer explicitly to a right to spiritual development, but these other provisions being Article 17 on information, Article 23 on children with disabilities, Article 27 that was mentioned about adequate standard of living, and Article 32 about the worst forms of labor. It's explicitly mentioned. And there are also at least, you can say, 2 other provisions in addition to Article 14, namely survival and development of Article 6 of the Convention, and also the aims of education, Article 29 of the Children's Rights Convention. However, there are some persons and states and even UNESCO, which kind of links, I would say, too closely spiritual and moral. I do sincerely believe that by fostering spirituality, you will create more moral individuals. But I do not think that you should link spiritual and moral in itself, because they are simply 2 different dimensions. And what I found in my study, which was a document review of approximately 200 state reports and 200 concluding observations by the Committee on the Rights of the Child from 3 different decades, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s, as well as all the general comments issued by the Committee on the Rights of the Child until then. That was 21. So what I found was that there had been an increase in the frequency of referring to spiritual development over the years. So from the 90s till 2012, 13, 14, 15, there was an increase in the number of references to spiritual development. And I found that 16 out of the 21 general comments had references to spiritual development. And the 5 that have come after that, which means general comment 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26, that is mentioned, 3 out of those 5 refer to spiritual development. So for instance, quite surprisingly, this general comment number 25 is not addressing spiritual development, even if the spiritual well-being is included in the convention itself. So which is somewhat surprising, I can say, but it's in the general comment number 26 and also number 22 and 23. So and then I kind of, in my article, I gave an advice on how to proceed with the drafting of a general comment on spiritual development. And I said that the committee in itself does not have many resources, but there is something called Human Rights Council advisory committee, which has 18 members, being individuals, and they can ask the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights about any issue. So, for instance, they can ask that the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights might distribute a survey or a questionnaire to the states, asking them about practices and views on spiritual development issues, and then based from that they can kind of give recommendations to whoever they like, but to the Human Rights Council about this issue, and that can provide a resource, I would say. Because I did find that there were some, I would call it, misconceptions about spiritual development among the states, not only this linking of the moral and the spiritual, but also issues that were relating to discipline and loyalty that also were used by some states in their reporting. And sometimes it was not commented by the committee. That is wrong, I would say, use of the spiritual development framework, or the deep understanding, I would rather call it. So from that, I think that there is some information in this article which could be useful. I just put out the DOI here so that it can be downloaded by those who want to read it. Then I'm being asked to talk about religion and spirituality or spiritual development very briefly. And Article 14 has been mentioned already. I can say that the committee itself does not make many links between Article 14 and spiritual development, but there are some states who do it. So I can just say that it is not very frequent, the explicit links, but I would say that in accordance with the definition that was given earlier, that the fourth dimension of spirituality is the relationship to the transcendent. And the transcendent can mean different things for different persons. But for a religious person, that means some religious dimension, so to say. So the religion is there. But when it comes to kind of defining religion and talking about religion, it is such a wide and diverse phenomena. And I can say that, at least from sitting in the Nordics, I can just say that that if you compare, for instance, Denmark with other countries, in Denmark, there is a decrease in people who have a kind of faith and people who think that religion is important in their lives. So that is one kind of way to express it. But there are more people going to church in Denmark. So that is kind of a very, and that is that can be explained by some form of, I would call it cultural Christianity, maybe, or some form of loyalty or staying together, social cohesion, by some form of building bonds, but maybe not including everyone, if you can use that term. And then you have kind of a development, I would say, where religion has become less and less dogmatic, at least in my part of the world. But you also see many other countries where religion has become more politicized and more polarizing. So this means that in a way, you can't talk easily about religion. Norway, in a way, stands out by having a quite inclusive conception, meaning that we include and give the same rights and the same support systems for non-religious belief systems, like the humanists, for instance, and even the persons who have a kind of a more lifestyle-based alternative worldview. They are giving a status as worldviews with same rights to public support, depending on the membership. So there are various ways also to formulate the inclusive ways of organizing your deepest and deep-held convictions. They do not only have to be religious. And I'm a Sunday school teacher, so I can speak from a religious Christian point of view. And I would say that how religion and spirituality in a way can be mutually strengthening, even for children. I think that is extremely important, that you do not present religion as a dogmatic, exclusive, some people are predestined to heaven and some are predestined to hell. This kind of dogmatics is in a way very far away from the experience I do have teaching deacons in Church of Norway mostly. But we do have those persons who are waiting for Armageddon, who are kind of in a way seeing religion as a tool for suppressing others. So I can just say that linking the positive aspects of religion and a much wider and much, I would say, more comprehensive conception of spirituality, where religion is kind of belonging to the fourth dimension, but it can, of course, also enrich the three other dimensions, because religion can nurture environmental concern, religion can nurture community feeling, and religion can nurture, I would say, also conceptions of responsibility within yourself. I would say responsibility and freedom, I think, is maybe the greatest gift of Christianity to the world. not the dogma, but the emphasis on freedom and responsibility. And I think that can't be in a way underestimated, even though those aspects of responsibility and freedom can also be abused. I think that they are in a way resources in the world that we see today. So thank you.
Very good points, Hans, and also many different aspects. I would like to highlight the important aspect that you have mentioned, that there is not an article in the convention that says the right of the child to spiritual development, but there are mentions about the importance of the spiritual dimension of the child for the holistic development, and of course the right of the child to standard of living that helps develop all the holistic aspect of the child, including the spiritual aspect. And I think that is precisely the issue, right? That is mentioned in several times, and as you said, understood very differently. And because there has not been a general comment or proper explanation of what is meant by that. And I think very good points on there are different understandings in terms of discipline, loyalty, moral, and of course, the last point on religion, because I think that there is a question that we can explore in our dialogue, that very often people think of a spiritual development of child in relation only to religion. And we said that it is not just religion, that is an innate aspect of the child. But as you mentioned also, Hans, religion has the potential to support the spiritual development of children. And I think, Maria Julia, you were mentioning that, when instead of seeing God as a God that punishes and so on, how we see religion also as a source for connection with the other, to forgive the other, our sense of responsibility and freedom, and all these aspects that are key for the spiritual development of children. So I think these are very very good food for thought. And I think has also opened up too many questions on the chat. So I'm gonna go back. If the four, Rinchen, if you can put on your camera, I would like to have the four panelists with all the cameras, and Oshan, if you can put all the cameras for everyone, so we can try to create a dialogue around that. There are several questions as well. But Rinchen, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm very much here.
Great. So maybe, Rinchen, I'm going to start with you, because Hans' last part, where he is saying that maybe there is a time for a general comment on the spiritual development, but that there is also maybe a way to work on it through the Human Rights Council advisory group or advisory council. So how do you see that proposal, Rinchen, and how do you see, I mean, there are many challenges to that, precisely because the lack of understanding and the different dimensions that these have. So how do you see this aspect, Rinchen?
Yeah, this is really actually very exciting, actually, in terms of the prospects. However, you also know, and I'm sure we all are aware, that the CRC committee actually has a very pressing agenda, a lot of backlogs, and also a very, very limited capacity. Now, we have just launched the General Comment 26, but we are already into now General Comment 27, and the working group has been formed. We are debating on the thematic areas and then moving forward, so that in 2 years' time, we have the next General Comment 27. So from that point of view, the idea of a general comment is definitely very attractive and exciting and much needed. Maybe what we need to do is, before we reach to the point where we advocate for a general comment definitively, I think we need to start preparing the ground where, some of the work many of our colleagues today, particularly also many of the issues which Dr. Hans in that research identified, I think we should put together a briefing paper, and then, the committee can, starting as soon as the paper is available, we get the committee to, members to get used to, thinking from that perspective. And ultimately, I think some of us can be convinced to even bring this up in our state party dialogues. I think this is something that we can start working on. Definitely, as we all know, and I think it was also in the comments chat box, the issue related to religion and spirituality and that, connect. I think that is something that we need to clearly define. And I think when it comes to religion, there are different religions. When it comes to spirituality, I think every religion actually professes spirituality. And I think no religion professes violence. Everybody wants to make sure that we are responsible towards ourselves as well as our neighbors and the environment. So I think there is a common bond without necessarily getting bogged down with this whole issue of religious discourse and debate and the sensitivity. So I'm definitely open to taking up anything that we are able to put together and lobby with my colleagues in the committee in terms of a better understanding on this.
Thank you, Rinchen. There is actually a very specific question which relates to this for you. Someone has asked, what challenges have you encountered in your role as Vice Chair of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, especially when advocating for children's spirituality or spiritual development, and how have these challenges been addressed or overcome? And I don't know if you have encountered those challenges, but if not, I would turn a little bit the question, Rinchen, what challenges you foresee when we start these discussions, and if we were to bring this dialogue to the Committee on the Rights of the Child, the other members, what challenges maybe you foresee in trying to integrate this more in the process of child rights?
As a member of the UN Child Rights Committee, one of the things that when you go first time to the committee, what sort of gets you immediately is that there are so many pressing issues which we deal with on the ground. And then when you get to the committee, we find we are limited by so many, challenges in terms of resources, in terms of, the backlogs, in terms of the period of the reporting, in terms of the compliance, in terms of the gaps, in terms of understanding by different stakeholders, the disconnected approach to a lot of the process that we tend to drive. So we deal with that on a day-to-day basis. But because I come from a background where violence against children is my, main obsession, and sometimes in the committee, we find that the implications or the connotations related to different forms of violence is not clearly perceived or understood. And we take it, for example, I'll give you an example, like child marriage. Now, child marriage, ending child marriage is something that cuts across all types of violence against children, whether it is sexual abuse, exploitation, child labor, slave-like form, burden. It's everything under that. But we get bogged down by age at which children can get married, harmful practices, and then trying to voice that child marriage is not just harmful practice. It's violation of a fundamental right of a child, girl child. So therefore, these are different challenges. And when we have specific articles, we face those challenges. But when it deal with something that is not explicitly a right, but also, discourse could be very abstract. And spirituality is something that is, out there where we philosophize rather than hold on to it and grab it as a tangible, approach. So I think the challenges are definitely going to be there. But
Yeah.
holding states accountable for children itself is a spiritual discourse and spiritual accountability. So I think we need to use our arguments and dialogues much more strategically, and I think we can push it actually.
Thank you, Rinchen. This is very good. Maria Julia, there is a particular question for you. What role do educational institutions play in promoting spiritual development? And how can they incorporate this aspect into curriculum and practices? This was directly to you, but you can also think of it more integration of the spiritual aspect, I think more in the life of children, the community. So what would be your thoughts on reflections on this, Maria Julia?
Y en las Américas, así como también ya nos compartía Hans y mencionaba Rima y Rinchen, la formación o el desarrollo espiritual está muy asociado a las iglesias, ¿verdad? En sus diferentes modalidades, en sus diferentes expresiones, sobre todo en cuanto a la cultura, digamos, hegemónica en nuestra región, tiene más que ver con la tradición judeocristiana y la práctica religiosa evangélica y también alguna llegada de grupos budistas, hinduistas, ¿verdad? Taoístas. Pero la situación autóctona de nuestra región, con la herencia y el legado de muchos pueblos originarios, también conserva esa tradición de una espiritualidad más vinculada a la cultura indígena, ¿verdad? A los pueblos originarios. Entonces, en los diferentes estados, la transmisión o el desarrollo espiritual no está ligado concretamente a una institución, sino son aquellas instituciones religiosas. O sea, hay una equivalencia, digamos, al desarrollo espiritual, al desarrollo religioso. Y en cuanto a los pueblos originarios, sí, sobre todo en aquellos estados donde se respeta, se protege y se promueve, digamos, el legado de los pueblos originarios, como es el caso, por ejemplo, en Bolivia, que se reconoce como un estado pluricultural, o por ejemplo en Paraguay, donde también conservan la lengua guaraní como idioma oficial, y otros estados que hacen de ese patrimonio cultural también el patrimonio espiritual. Entonces, realmente para hablar de un mapeo o una identificación de qué instituciones desarrollan esta dimensión, tendríamos que establecer ese vínculo con las iglesias. En experiencia de algunos estados están el comité de iglesias vinculado, por ejemplo, a ayudas en situaciones de emergencia o de ayuda humanitaria. Entonces, la verdad que es un pendiente. Sería interesante en el marco del convenio que tenemos desde el Instituto con Arigato, en los cursos que hacemos de derechos de niño y de espiritualidad, hacer tal vez este mapeo, esta identificación en los diferentes estados. Pudiera ser un lindo tema de trabajo de estos cursos. Entonces, agradezco a la persona que hizo la pregunta.
Thank you so much, Maria Julia. And again, bringing up the aspect of how also the cultural aspect shapes the understanding of spirituality. And I think Hans was talking also from the perspective in the Nordic countries also in a way how it shapes the understanding. And this is a great idea on mapping, Maria Julia, how the spirituality of children is in a way nurtured in different states, and particularly if it happens through education, or it only happens through religious communities, or it happens through the more indigenous practices in their communities. So I think understanding and also different roles that different institutions play are very critical. So thank you for this offer, and I think we will take it up also, Maria Julia, to see how we can explore and move forwards. Thank you so much. Rima, I want to maybe focus on the particular question now that we are talking about collaborations. So how can international organizations collaborate with governments and civil society to address the challenges and barriers to promote the child right to spiritual development, or the understanding of spiritual development within the rights of the child, and to ensure that it's integrated in child development policies and programs? So you have experience for working for many years also with UNICEF, but also, with the UN system as well. So how can we initiate more collaborations and perhaps challenge maybe the understanding that the spiritual development connects uniquely to religion? What would be your recommendations, Rima?
Yes, thank you very much, Maria Lucia. Yes, unfortunately, until now, there is lack of recognition and understanding on the right to spirituality and the holistic approach to child development. Also, what is disturbing is that integrated ECD intervention, early childhood development and care, are also not prioritized by governments and agencies in emergency response, for example. But I think we have all the opportunities now to speak in one voice. We have all the tools. And I think it's so important also now at the United Nations, where they are discussing a new agenda for peace. The draft new agenda for peace that is going to be adopted next year, when I looked at it, does not include children. It includes now communities, the importance of people and communities to build peace. But children as such are not mentioned. I think we have all the opportunity to elevate this and include children in the new agenda for peace. It is also important that the Convention on the Rights of the Child has been ratified by all countries in the world except one country. So we have to entreat governments and make them accountable. We have to entreat governments, policymakers, community leaders, including religious leaders, to safeguard the increasing undermined rights of young children, living particularly in very fragile contexts, and prioritize investment in their survival, development, which includes spiritual and protection. So they and their families live in peace and dignity. Dignity is also part of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Also, I think we need to persist in the pursuit of knowledge, addressing the gap in science with a focus on interdisciplinary research, including the importance of spiritual development. This will help to reinforce the evidence that will further inform global policies, national policies, strategies, and programs for early childhood development that can contribute to build peaceful societies. We have to do it, because if we don't show them by evidence, that we will not achieve what we're going to have. Also, what is important, sorry, I'm being long here, but we have to empower families and parents and caregivers through designing and implementing early childhood programs that are multi-level and rooted in the nurturing care framework, benefiting the child, the parent, the caregiver, the community, including religious leaders. The program should be safe, protective, inclusive, including programs of ethics and spiritual values. They must be cultural sensitive. We all spoke about culture, particularly Maria. You spoke a lot about culture. Yes, we have to respect the culture of every child, of every family. This is also very important. And we have to communicate existing examples and cases of effective programs in other countries, in many countries, such as Colombia, such as such as Ireland, such as Turkey and other countries. So we need a greater commitment from every one of us. We all need to sit at the table. Let's take our place, all of us, at the table, at all levels. We are equipped to do it. We have powerful tools in our hands. So let us do it together and give hope to the millions of families who have lost hope in humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rima, for this call and appeal to collaborate. And I think one important aspect is the interdisciplinary research that you mentioned, and you have talked even in your previous intervention about the scientific evidence on the importance of early childhood, the importance of the early years, the importance of working with parents and caregivers, but also the new evidence that we have seen in terms of the spiritual development of children and how it contributes to the development of prosocial behavior, resilience in children, particularly in context of violence and fragility and so on. So I think that is an important aspect as a takeaway on how we strengthen this interdisciplinary research as well, that can serve as evidence to promote to organizations, UN agencies, and governments on the importance of this aspect. So thank you so much for this, Rima. And Hans, the last time, the last question is for you. There is one question in the chat, which is from Pakistan, from Mr. Arshad, from the chair of the National Commission, I think, for Children in Pakistan. And it's related to what we have been talking about. There are societies where connotation of spiritual development is directly understood as religious affiliation only. How to make this concept more acceptable socially and culturally in such societies. So I think in that, but also maybe in closing remarks, Hans, what would be your recommendations?
Yeah, there are many ways to frame this. I just recommend that's because in Norway there are many who wouldn't use the term spiritual, rather they would use the term existential, simply because the spiritual has sometimes a new age dimension to it, sometimes a kind of too religious in a way. I, for instance, have been warned against using a term like faith-based. Also because the term faith-based seems to give too much, in a way, visibility to religion, exactly in such regions and countries where religion has been serving as a dividing and not a unifying force. So I would just kind of say that every time you speak about spirituality, just mention these 4 dimensions. Spirituality is creating meaning and relationships to oneself, to others, to the nature, and to the transcendent. So like every time you mention it, actually it might take too many seconds, but it should be possible to kind of say it's about meaning making or about creating meaning and relationships. And then you mention these 4 relationships. Or you could also talk about it as a contribution to holistic view on the human person, not only body and mind, but also the spiritual dimension. So that there are 2 ways, I would say. One is to talk about a holistic view of the human person, and the other one is to talk about meaning making or meaningfulness and relationships. So I don't think you can in a way avoid explaining briefly, at least, what spirituality means. It might sometimes be a bit abstract, but then if a person asks, what about relationships? What do you mean relationships to nature? What do you mean by that? And what do you mean by relationship to the transcendent? Then you can engage in a conversation about it, because if a person asks back, then you have in a way engaged that person to talk further. So I think that you can start by this relatively brief ways, and then if the person asks, then you are ready to say more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hans. So the importance of the language, no? We in this intersectoral approach, and we work with different understandings, how we explain it and bridge with the language that can help us maybe connect more to the different sectors, ways of seeing and different views as well. So our time has come to an end now. I think it went very quickly, and it has been extremely enriching also. And I think we have several recommendations also moving forward, from raising awareness, also developing a paper that can be maybe brought to the Committee on the Rights of the Child, doing more interdisciplinary research that can help us evidence, doing a mapping, particularly in the Americas, to understand how this spiritual dimension of the child is nurtured in different by different constituencies. The language that we use and how we describe it, as Hans was saying, but also I think the collaboration with different actors. And even if we disconnect it to religion, we know that 84% of the world also subscribe to some kind of religion. So I think working with religious communities, as we were saying, so to make also contribute that religion is a force for spirituality rather than a force for division. I think that's an important aspect. So I want to close with special thanks to all of you for the wonderful contributions and the reflections, for the many recommendations. We'll be following up on these. We will send a thank you message to all the people who registered to this webinar with the link, the recording to this webinar, but also the link to articles and maybe some of the links to materials that you mentioned during the discussion today. And I also want to highlight the work of the consortium Nurturing Values and Spirituality in Early Childhood. Last year in Rome, we launched a toolkit on nurturing the spiritual development of children for the protection of children from violence and to nurture their well-being. And my colleagues will put now on the chat the link to the toolkit. Is available in Spanish and available in English. And it's being implemented systematically in Brazil, Mexico, Pakistan, and India. And we are doing monitoring and evaluation to understand how it is integrated and what feedback we receive from parents, caregivers, from faith actors, from organizations about the topic to help us build more the evidence. So we hope that we continue this dialogue. It's a journey, and it's also a movement. And as Rima was saying, let us join efforts together and then develop these pathways to peace, as the world needed today, and our children more than ever need to be nurtured in the spirit of peace and understanding. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, our participants, and also our interpreter for helping us with the interpretation into Spanish. Thank you very much, Rinchen, Rima, Maria Julia, and Hans.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much, and look forward to the
peace.
journey.
Let's all pray for
and
peace.
Pray for peace. Indeed,
Let's
pray for peace. Yeah.
Let's pray for
Okay.
peace. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye. Bye.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti, María Julia.
Thank
Un
you.
abrazo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. Thank you, everyone.